Right now, at this point in time, the death toll from the Titanic tragedy has risen from 1,517 to 1,522, and may God rest their souls.
Well, I'm joined now, rejoined in fact, by a guest I had last night, Fred Hagen, who was on board the last two Titan missions and knows two of the people on board, Stockton Rush and Paul Henry Nargeolet. Well, Fred, I'm really sad to speak to you again now that we know the news, which I think we both probably feared yesterday but didn't want to say, that very sadly everyone on board has lost their lives. What is your reaction to what we just heard?
Well, Piers, as you can imagine, sitting here listening to this press conference while waiting to talk to you has made this much more difficult than I anticipated. And I can only say that the world has lost two radiant points of light with Stockton and PH. And as we talked yesterday, these men were great men who tried greatly and risked everything. And I want their epitaph to be what Teddy Roosevelt said, that the credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, and who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. And that, to me, is the true epitaph of Stockton Rush and P.H. Nargeolet and their companions. And I'm very sorry. It was just devastating sitting here listening to the realization of what we all feared and then trying to express my feelings moments later. I apologize.
Fred, there's no apology obviously needed at all. I know from our conversation yesterday how personally moved you've been by this. The rest of the world has watched on in sort of mounting horror as this story has unraveled. For you, it was incredibly personal. You've been on this vessel, you've been on the last two Titanic missions in 2021 and 22 with Stockton Rush, with your friend PH. He'd been down to that wreckage 30 odd times, I think, and brought back so many extraordinary things for the world to see. He was a genuine historian in that sense. We're looking at a picture of you all now. It's a desperately sad time for you and for everyone who knew them, their friends, their families, everyone. And it's a sad time, I think, for the world to look on and see people who ultimately, as I said yesterday, I got very angry about the reaction from certain people about the fact that they were wealthy people paying to go down there and so on. To me, they were intrepid explorers. It doesn't matter how much money you have. They're intrepid explorers. And some are paid to be there and some were being paid to be there. It makes no difference. The goal was to go down and find new information which could shed light on one of the great tragedies of the history of this planet, which was the sinking of the Titanic. And I commend them for the courage that it took to do that. And I think that their death is an absolute tragedy. But they should be remembered as heroes who went down there. I wouldn't go down there. I mean, I admire you for doing it. You know, it's an extraordinary thing to want to do.
And Piers, I'd like to say that right now, at this point in time, the death toll from the Titanic tragedy has risen from 1,517 to 1,522, and may God rest their souls.
Dr. Michael, you know better than most the difference. You've been on a submersible in 2000. You went down there for ABC News. You were the first TV correspondent in history to report from the wreck of the Titanic at the bottom of the ocean. We've got a little clip of this, I think.
As we approach the stern of the ship, we're suddenly caught up in a strong underwater current. that pushes us towards one of the gigantic 21-ton propellers.
Oh my God, look at the size of these things.
Oh my gosh, so are we stuck or what?
As this graphic shows, we appear to be somehow wedged beneath the wreck of the stern.
A scary moment for you. Does this bring back pretty awful memories of what happened to you and what could have happened?
Yeah. I'm feeling pretty sick right now. And agree with the lieutenant. The two things that come out at me right now is the loss of communications, because even when we were stuck down there, our pilot, who was a former Russian MiG pilot, was piloting our three-man sub, much smaller than the one that's currently in this situation. And he was able to communicate with the surface ship, the research vessel, the Academic Keldysh, on the surface. I couldn't understand what they were saying. It was all in Russian, but nevertheless. And then the second thing that stands out to me, Piers, is, as the lieutenant pointed out, if it had just been a failure of communications, then that pilot would have brought that thing up to the surface immediately. So, I mean, we can speculate endlessly. I hate doing it because lives are at stake.
I'm really sorry.
I can see what that feels like. It's an awful feeling to be stuck under there and be utterly hopeless. It's not easy to get out of that.
I can see the emotion there in you. That this is obviously, and indeed also for you, Jannicke, because Dr. Michael, I guess you must have had a moment when you were in a similar situation where you thought you may not get out of it, right?
Yeah, more than a moment, the better part of an hour. And being a scientist, of course, I'm a professional problem solver. So my first instinct was, number one, to hope nobody in the cabin would panic, because we had been told by the captain of our ship before we went down that he told us a true story of a gentleman who was found himself in that situation, and in his panic went for the escape hatch to open it up. It's right above your head. And of course, that was the end of it, because as the lieutenant said, the pressures down there are enormous. I filed a story for 2020 and then Good Morning America. And just to illustrate how powerful the pressure is down there, we took some styrofoam cups, and the cup came back about that small, and all the air had been squeezed out of it from the pressure down there. That brings it home. It's a very hostile environment, very cold, very high pressure. Yes, for the better part of an hour, I kept thinking, well, how could we get out of this? There was another Russian sub in the vicinity, and I thought perhaps it could tow us out, but of course, it's not feasible. It's not AAA, comes tow you out of the mud. And I just ran through the checklist of things in my mind, and I finally came to that moment, that brick wall, that utter sense of hopelessness. And the words that came into my mind were, this is how it's going to end for you. And you have to understand, I've been to the North Pole, the South Pole. I've covered the Persian Gulf War for 14 years, ABC News. I've been all over the world. I've been in harm's way everywhere. But those words came into my mind, and I'll never forget them. This is how it's going to end for you. And I thought of my wife, Laurel, thought I'd never see her again. Just by the grace of God, Victor and his skill managed to weasel our way out of that big propeller. And it's a big propeller. Our ship was very small. You have to understand. It's a huge propeller. Our ship is small in comparison. We just got trapped in the blades. But if it weren't for Victor's heroic efforts, I wouldn't be here today.
Taking risks is the fire behind the human spirit. This ravenous desire to adventure, explore and conquer has taken us, mere human beings, to the planet's tallest peaks and beyond into space. It drove us to populate and dominate the world, and to this day it bursts through the boundaries of science and tests the limits of human potential. Without it, frankly, we're just lumps of dull meat. The 5 people on board the missing Titan submersible who have gone missing by the side of the wreckage of the Titanic, they took a major risk, and they knew what that risk was. The waiver they signed mentions potential death 3 times on its front page. They're under no illusion about what may happen down in the murky depths of that ocean. The pledge made clear that the experimental vessel has not been approved or certified by any regulatory body. Any failure could cause severe injury or death. So they knew that, but they wanted to do it anyway. They were prepared to plunge almost 4,000 meters into the dark and icy depths in a tin can the size of a car for a glimpse of one of the great historic legends, the Titanic. I wouldn't do it. I hate heights and I hate depths. But my God, I admire those who do this kind of thing. Last night I interviewed Jannicke Mikkelsen, a close friend of billionaire explorer Hamish Hardish, who's strapped on board.
Hamish is larger than life. He loves exploration. He's been to space, he's been to the deepest point of the planet, he's been to the South Pole, and he's also mentored me a lot in my career as an explorer, and this is why I'm living close to the North Pole, to train to be a polar explorer and survive in the polar climate.
It's hard not to admire someone who succeeded in life, made all his money, but chooses to spend his time at the frontiers of human existence, and of course spend his money in the process. But not everyone agrees. We live in spiteful times, fueled by vicious social media. Some people seem to think that because the people on the sub are wealthy, then they're fair game just for mindless abuse, even though they may already be dead. Hamish Hardish tweeted one of these people. One of the bleep billionaires on that stupid submarine is rich from running a private jet company, said this pathetic individual. He's literally cooking the planet alive or meant to feel bad. His stupid head has been squashed by the righteous pressure of the ocean. Imagine tweeting that to the world, that that's your thought about people who are either trapped and may never escape or are dead because they went to try to explore. I can't imagine being that disgusting. We used to glorify explorers. We used to revel in their adventure and celebrate them. And certainly we would mourn them if they failed in their risky challenges. But now people like to despise them and laugh at them when they're in their most utmost peril. And there were loads of comments like this on Twitter in the last couple of days. Maybe we can get rid of the world's billionaires by encouraging them to take pleasure trips on mini submarines to view the wreck of the last mini submarine crammed with billionaires, said this charming lady. Keep it going, she said, like the old lady who swallowed a fly until they're all gone. And a friend of this show, Ash Sarkar, an otherwise intelligent political commentator, said this: if the super rich can spend £250,000 on vanity jaunts 2.4 miles beneath the ocean, then they're not being taxed enough. Again, what would prompt you to say that when we don't know what's happened to these people, when they might be dead or dying or desperate, terrified, in total darkness, freezing cold, the bottom of the ocean? Why would your mind turn to being envious of money they've made or thinking this is about taxation? It's nothing to do with tax and nothing to do with your pathetic jealousies. There's a frantic search now to rescue 5 innocent lives. Now is not the time for puerile abuse on Twitter or pathetic student politics. If these keyboard warriors had the reins, we'd never discover most of the world we live in or make it to space or to the depths of the ocean. We'd still be using leeches to cure the plague. Adventurers are the people who strive to go bigger, harder, faster and stronger than the rest of us. They take risks we wouldn't want to do all the time. Tonight, with just hours of oxygen remaining on board that tiny vessel, I just want to say, and I hope most right-minded people would agree with me, that I hope these 5 adventurers somehow survive to tell their stories and then plan their next adventure, because they are the type of people that really makes this world go round. Andrew Tate, obviously I've interviewed him several times. He's now been charged in Romania with rape, human trafficking and forming an organised crime group to sexually exploit women. His brother Tristan and 2 associates also have faced charges. They all deny the allegations. This is what Andrew Tate said outside court today.
I would like to say a massive thank you to all the supporters we have around the world. Regardless of what the mainstream media keeps saying and the lies they try and purport, we get tens of thousands of messages from people every single day supporting us, and they understand that we're not the first affluent, wealthy men who have been unfairly attacked. In our situation, unfortunately, it happens quite often.
So an emphatic denial, an emphatic defence, you'd expect nothing else from him. But what do we make of this case? Can he get a fair trial in Romania?
Well, we'll see. It should be dealt with on the facts, but I don't think I'll be joining any vigils outside the Romanian embassy or suggesting Amnesty International make him a prisoner of conscience.
So you've convicted him before he's actually faced a trial?
He's a deeply unsympathetic character because he's profited from
guilty.
spreading
That's
hate.
that's what I was saying.
Doesn't make him innocent, but doesn't make him guilty.
This is
No,
more.
but
I know this is controversial. I actually think he is innocent, and I think this is more about reputation damage than anything, because I think they've taken so long to even charge him, and he's always proclaimed his innocence. And I think if he was guilty of all of these things, he wouldn't be the world's most
I will be
Googled
very
man.
interested to see this trial, actually,
Yeah.
to see what actually comes out, and let justice take its course.
As president, I think my responsibility is to the notion of all people created equal. I, as president, quite the opposite of what you just said. As president, hey, I want the whole notion of my presidency would be, please be who you want to be, do what you want to do, spread your wings and soar. If you get to the point where you're infringing on the rights of other people, you're going to have a hard time
How would
with
you
me.
feel if a man decided to, a male politician, decided to suddenly identify as female and became the first woman president of the United States?
I'd be like, damn, but that wouldn't mean...
You wouldn't just be damned, you'd be like, what?
I don't think...
You'd be horrified.
But that doesn't mean I think it would be illegal or that it should
I didn't say it'd be illegal. That's the whole point.
No.
The whole
Listen.
point, Madam Would-Be President, is it's perfectly legal.
I think, well, that's my
It's
point.
just wrong.
I don't even think it's wrong. It's just I think we'd all down a few glasses of wine that night. We wouldn't be real happy about it.